Good evening. This is Drew, and I welcome you back to Friday Night Dark. Hey, tonight, I'm just going to tell a story. A story, well, as only I can tell it. And of course, this is one that I'm just going to tell you offhand. It's not real, but it is. And this one is actually one that was shared with me a while back. If you recall, I did a whole stint on spells. And the person who told me this story said I could do it this way. And so here it is. And with that, I'm going to tell you the story about Lou and his love spell. It goes something like this. My name is Lou, and I live in the San Fernando Valley in Southern California. It is no secret that I'm a witch. You heard me right. That guy that does the spell thing is supposedly supposed to ride brooms and turn people into frogs and what have you. Yeah, they're not all women. Some are guys. Yeah. But here I am. I'm going to tell you a story that I have. And it goes something like this. A while back, I was in a really dark place. There were some people that I lost. They were victim to some gangs. And I had a big bad breakup. And of course, as everything was at that moment, I was in a very dark place. And for some reason, and I don't know why, I needed some sage advice. I went to some friends. I was talking about things. Some were really nice about it. Some didn't want to hear me. And still yet others, they were just watchful, making sure that I wouldn't do anything stupid, as they said. But no, I didn't. I couldn't. Not because I was afraid to, just because I just couldn't. I couldn't afford it. Really. But moving along, I found myself one day staring at the ceiling. I picked up my phone and I called a friend. Darla, can I talk to you? And of course, she came back with, I can talk to you in the morning, but I'll be busy all afternoon and evening. I said, I'll make it worth your while, and I'll even treat you to lunch before you have to go to work. Of course you will. So the both of us met up at a bookshop that was in Sherman Oaks. And this particular bookshop, I'm just going to call it the Psychic Bookshop. I don't know why, because that's basically what it is. But there we met, and there was this long table there with all kinds of teas and coffee and what have you that you could try out and enjoy and read a book. It was one of the things they used to do to entice people to buy books, because they figured if you read them, you might actually buy them. And they were right about 90% of the time. But it was also a supply store. And so someone like me would go there to buy things. You know, hexes, curses, spells. But I digress. Moving forward, I met up with Darla, and there she was, and we spoke about some things going on in my life as normal. She asked if she could pull a few cards for me, and I said no. And she said, no, really, it's on the house. I said no. And so we were talking, and I just said, I want to do something. I just don't know exactly what. And I started going over all of the ideas of spells, something that might help improve my life. This raised her eyebrow because she knew that meant that I was looking for a recipe, perhaps. And this is the other thing that I knew Darla was great for. You see, she also, like me, would do things, and she was very much well-versed in what components that you might need, if you will. So occasionally she would come out with some kind of idea or thing that you might use. But this particular morning, as I was chatting with her, she said, so what exactly are you trying to do? What do you want? And I said, well, I don't know. I mean, I know I can do this, this, and this, and this. I have to have this, and I have to have that. But what components would I need to bring about something that would make me somewhat happy, if not satisfied? And she said, Lou, if there's anybody in this entire planet that needed something, it's you, and it's more than likely the idea of wanting to be wanted. Wouldn't that be right? We went back and forth on this for a while, and eventually I harbored on the idea that, well, perhaps maybe you're right. And yet here I was, wanting to figure out how to do it. And of course, Darla picked up on my cue as I was wandering in my thoughts. She said, Lou, I'm just going to let you know, there is a way to do this. You got to think of a spell kind of like an omelet. And I said, why? And she said, because an omelet, you can pretty much have the basic ingredients. What makes it what it is for you are the things that you add to it to do exactly what you want. Do you want a spicy feel? You put in certain types of vegetables and herbs and what have you. If you want something that's kind of plain, you leave it alone. If you want something that is going to be completely off the wall, you're going to use ingredients that would be unusual but still taste good. But mind you, they have to work together. Now, I realized what she was getting at. She was telling me that if I was to make a spell that would be what I want, then it has to be a certain way. We went to a restaurant that was down the road from there. She always liked to get margaritas and the food that was there. And so, of course, as we went into this particular restaurant, it was no surprise that there was a margarita on her menu list along with her favorite food. After eating and drinking, we were walking out when we ran into some friends, and of course they were saying, "Hey, I never thought you'd be talking to Darla this soon." And I said, "I'm just consulting." They said, "Yeah, right." I gave them a glare and said, "No, that's not why I'm here." But I did tell them I'd meet with them later. I had a project to work on. And so they looked at Darla, and then they looked at me, and they said, "Lou, we'll see you this afternoon, I'm sure." I said, "No, it'll be this evening." So we went on and started talking, and we went back to the bookshop. She went and had to clock in as she normally did. And for me, it was a moment to where I had to be able to pick out the components that were there. Now, I was looking at this statue they always had when you first walked in. There were these cats. One that was kind of one beckoning in, and it had all these symbols all over it, and one that looked like it was an overstuffed cat, and he had a smug look on his face, like, "I know something you don't." And above them both was this golden painted towering Buddha that they had right there in the doorway. They once told me what it was, and they said it was some form of feng shui that they were trying to do. And at the time I raised an eyebrow because I had no clue what they were talking about. I really wasn't interested in that type of, I guess, interior decorating with a paranormal touch to it. But there were people that did that. It was a thing, and it was kind of an unspoken thing. But I had really a mission to do. I had to get components for myself. I went through all of these shelves, and I found the things one by one in the basket that I had procured in front of those fat cats. And as I gathered my stuff, I decided exactly what I was going to ask for. Yes, I was going to do something that I was forewarned never to do. I was going to cast a love spell. I'd seen so many TV shows, and my friend Drew had basically said to me on several occasions that you shouldn't ever pay attention to Hollywood, especially TV shows, because they're meant for entertainment purposes only. And yeah, he's right, but in this instance, I drew inspiration. You see, there was one in particular where they were using for a love potion for one person, and I decided, why not have it for both people? No, really, both people. There would be no flaw in that now, would there? This got me thinking, and it got me thinking of someone I remember way back when. In my early elementary school years, there was this girl that I had a crush on, and I thought of her, and I thought of her in a way I hadn't before. What if I was to actually bring her to me? Now, this was testing the limits, I'm sure. But hey, I had to really think about this, and I went over all the components that I was about to purchase and realized that I had probably already subconsciously thought about it because they were all in my basket, the way I wanted it to be. So I grabbed everything, took it to the counter, and paid for it. The cashier looked at me and said, "I see you walked in with Darla again." And I said, "Of course." "Did she give you a reading?" "No, she didn't. We just went to lunch." "Oh, she had a margarita, didn't she?" Now, I was told on several occasions by Darla never to reveal that she had a margarita. So I said, "No, she didn't. She had a lemonade. At least I think it was a lemonade because that's exactly what she said to the waitress," and winked. She had a margarita. We both laughed, and I just said, I can't help myself. I got a cover for her, so I'm just letting you know that. Okay. Kudos, because you didn't tell me that. So anyhow, I grabbed all my things, and I took it to my vehicle, and I went home. Once I got there, I set everything out. Candles were lit. Incense was burning. Smoke was everywhere. I called the corners, drew my circle, and then I began to do my thing. I won't go into the details of the components there. I'll just let you know that I was going to do my thing. And as I was talking and I was doing the things that I always do, I said out loud that person's name. You see, I figured if I call them out, that would be part of it. And the other part would be that they would be calling me at the same time. So the person who called me is the same person who'd call. That's the way it was supposed to work. So there I was, doing my whole spell. And for no particular reason at all, I said out her name out loud. Monica. And I didn't understand what was going on. I kept saying, "Monica." And before I knew it, I said her name a third time, Monica. And I kept thinking, why am I doing this? I'm not even thinking of that TV show with that same name of that one guy. What was her brother's name? Or was it Ross or something? I can't remember. But either way, it was just there. It just came out of my mouth. And after that, no more. I finished the spell and I realized I had made a grave mistake. I only used the first name. You see, the thing about spells is you have to be very specific, and I wasn't in this case. I wasn't very specific at all. I knew I made a mistake. There was no undoing it. It was like getting a tattoo and then trying to cover it up. You just can't do it in the same day. The consequences would have to be borne for a little while. But maybe it was okay to ride this one out. In the back of my mind, I kept thinking this isn't going to work. Boy, was I wrong. Here I was, doing everything I could to just do something and be with someone that I figured might be the way I was looking at, and I didn't know if it was going to happen at all. So, as everything was done, I found myself cleaning up, closing out my circle, and getting ready for the evening. I found myself going to one of those nightclubs that was out there in the North Hollywood area. And it was one specifically that my friends liked to go visit to. And when we were there, it was no surprise that they were talking to me about several things. They decided to go one direction. I said, "I'm just going to be right here. I just want to read my book." Now, the irony here is that I was reading a book on a bar, but I had a drink. And the bartender came over. She says, "Well, this is unusual. You're reading a book and you've got a drink. Are you actually drinking the drink or are you just reading the book?" I said both. At that moment, without hesitation, I took a draw off of the drink. She said, "Oh, that's great. Then I have another thing for you." And I said, "Oh, really?" She said, "Yeah." She says, "If you want, I'll give you another one on the house, but you got to go to a table." I laughed, of course, and then I said, "Fine, I can do that." So I picked up my drink and my book, And I proceeded to like move away. She said, no, it's okay. I'm not chasing you off. She says, I just thought maybe, maybe it was something that might be a little bit more conducive to your reading. What are you reading about? Oh, this and that. Nothing serious. I asked her what made her want to talk to me, and she says, I don't know. She says just the fact that I know that I just kept hearing something. And then she said, well, what was it you were drinking again? And I told her it was a Long Island iced tea. She said, okay, well, I'll bring you another. I looked at her tag and I said, oh, that's an interesting name, Monique. And she said, actually, no. The way that it's spelled out, it's supposed to be Monica. She gave me her phone number about 20 minutes later. And I immediately started to find myself at that table that she said I should go to. Now, I thought this was kind of odd. I told her I would call her in a couple of days, but then I decided that I was going to go somewhere else. Now, of course, they don't have those things that we have these days. I had to actually call a yellow cab. But I told the yellow cab guy, hey, do me a favor, I want you to drive me to Santa Monica. And I says, I want you to take me here. Just drop me off. Here's the money in advance. Can you get me there with this? And he said, sure. Before I knew it, we were there, and I got out, and I was walking on this open-air mall. When I got to the end of it, there was a restaurant there that was still open. I went in, sat down, and realized that it was a Japanese restaurant. And I started to look at the chef that was there and said, hey, I want you to give me this kind of a roll. Can you do that? He said, sure. And so I was putting everything together. I began to eat it, and I said, wow. I said, this is a great roll. What's it called? He said, the Monica Surprise. I said, what's the surprise? He says, He says, but won't you want to find out? I says, and why Monica? And so then, as I said that, someone came out from behind and said something, and he said, that's Monica. And I looked over, and there was somebody that looked almost like the person I had thought of that I had met so many years ago. Didn't know what to do with myself, but I said, okay. And I said, Monica, okay. I said, so are you the surprise? And she said, no. And I said, okay, well, he says it's Monica Surprise. What's the surprise in this role? And she said, I can't tell you. It's like, one of those business things. Okay. But there you go. Now, we talked for about 5 minutes, and she asked me if I'd ever come back around, if I went there often. I said, oh, occasionally, just not often enough. She said, come by tomorrow, and I'll make you something. I said, okay, but I have to do something first. So with that, I got up. That's 2. Now in the process, I went home. And when I did get home, I was finding myself in front of my computer. I booted it up, and before I knew it, it was dialing into some online service. The online service, there I found myself talking to not 1 but 2 people. By the way, they both were named Monica. And so, as I was talking to both of them, in a messaging sort of way, I kept saying to myself, there's something wrong with this picture. As I talked to both of the people that were there on the computer, both of them happened to be in the same city, but they were in 2 different states. One was in Florida, and one was north of me in California. And I realized, there's 2 people here. I kept talking to them both. And eventually I realized, I'm just going to have to figure this out. And there I was, trying to come up with some idea of how I was going to handle things, because it was starting to get out of hand already. You see, now there were 4 different gals that I was running into, and all of them by the name of Monica. What are the odds? I did something and I wasn't specific, and I made a mistake, and I knew it. But because I had to do what I was doing, I had to work it out. I had to live with that. One by one, I started to call them out and I found a way to counter what I was doing. And one said, "Oh, I found out from your friends that you like to do weird spooky things and didn't want to talk to me." The one at the sushi bar said, "Oh, no, I'm against that completely. I don't like what you do. And I found out why you've been doing this. No." The other two didn't know each other from Adam. Pun intended. And so when I continued to talk with them, I knew at one point I would have to decide which way I was going to go. One was pretty nice about things, really laid back and, well, somewhat geographically desirable. The other one was on the other side of the country. And there I was with a decision. Which way to go? I found myself calling Darla. And she said, "It's simple. You just have to do one thing." I said, "Sure." And she said, "You have to flip a coin." I says, "Darla, how is that going to do anything for me?" And she says, "You just have to flip a coin." I said, "Okay." And I did. Now, of course, as things went on, the coin told me which direction I had to go in. And no matter how hard I tried, the coin pointed the way. I found myself time and again with several encounters with that person, that Monica. And so one day I said, "Hey, would it be okay if we met?" And there was a silence on the phone, because at that point we were talking on the phone. It was long distance calls. I tell you, they were expensive. Worth it. And eventually it came down to, sure. And the rest, as they say, was history. Why is because that person became my betrothed. And we hand fasted. No, not in California, not in Florida. We hand fasted in the middle of Texas, in a forest, in Austin. Something like that. It was really nice. But there we were together, and they've been with me ever since. The thing about it is that, no, I never met the person it was intended to be for. I did find something, and yes, I did find some satisfaction. I took a cue from a friend of mine. He basically had said that sometimes you're going to find things in the most unlikely of places. And he was right. But I did it in the most unlikely of ways. I used a spell. Now you're probably wondering what this has to do with anything. I'm going to tell you right now, if you decide to engage in such an idea and use magic to find somebody, be very specific. And for that matter, make sure that when you're making your omelet, your spell, that way to call someone from the depths and have them come to you as you come to them, calling at the same time, that the people that you specify, first and last name, or whatever it is to describe that person, because if you don't, you're going to get something you didn't ask for. Luckily for me, it was really lucky. Others, they might not have the same success. I never actually recorded exactly what I did, and I don't remember the exact components that I used. But I will tell you this. If you go about doing something along those guidelines, remember one thing. Be specific. And make sure the details are well planned out before you even utter one word. For anyone that's listening, I'm just going to let you know that this was the exact testimony given to me by Lou. He is a friend of mine, and that's how he met his wife. There's a sad end to that. You see, many years later, she succumbed to cancer, and she ended her battle in a valiant effort. I understand that she had many friends, some of which that were on a computer, just like him. And you know, the funny part about it is that being online was apparently a very avid part of their lives, both together. So I probably would tell you that if you're going to do anything, I think lose words are best. You definitely just want to be specific. I wanted to share this with you when I was talking about spells, but I was kind of afraid to. But I figured this would be a great story to tell now. And hopefully somewhere in there, you might decide you want to talk about this. And if you do, hopefully you talk about it with me. Where else? Friday Night Dark at nighttracks.com.